An Erie Situation is going to be shown tonight kind of as a catalyst to help our West Michigan watershed stakeholders kind of get together and start having some discussions to focus on what we can do to prevent harmful algal blooms in Muskegon Lake and all of the lakes we have along the eastern shoreline of Lake Michigan.
My name is David Ruck. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm from Whitehall, Michigan. I've been working on really environmental storytelling and science communication since about 2001, 2002. So the bulk of my career has been kind of telling stories about science and how humans impact the environment. So we're here today. My film is called The Erie Situation. It focuses on harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie, which is a huge problem there. But while Lake Erie might make the national news for this issue, it can be an issue in some of these smaller inland lakes like Muskegon Lake. And in fact, 2 years ago, October of 2021, there was a bloom that you could barely see in Muskegon Lake unless you knew what you were looking for. And when the scientists sampled it, it was actually about 100 times more toxic than an algae bloom in Lake Erie. So the algae bloom that I saw when I was making this film was 600 square miles of just thick greenness. And yet, what we were seeing in Muskegon Lake was potentially, especially if you didn't know what it was, had higher risks associated with it. So it's an issue here as well. And so this is a story, I want people to see what this looks like when it really starts to impact the economy, really starts to impact human health and the environment, really starts to impact the political discourse in a state or a region. Many industries can be impacted by how you either deal or don't deal with this. We're hoping that this doesn't become a greater issue throughout the Great Lakes, but reality is we have climate change. We're adding a lot of nutrients to the land which enter into the waterways, and that can happen through agriculture, it can happen through old septic systems. People over-fertilizing their lawn is becoming less of an issue, but in some of these smaller sort of gated, smaller communities around a small lake, that might be more of a problem. So that's why we're here today. We're here to have a conversation. We're here to show the film. As a storyteller, I also want people to be entertained, engaged, and I think that's the goal. Having an event like this it's a community event. It's free. The doors are open. We want people to come here and learn and start interacting with each other and talking about this or other environmental issues that are affecting our region. It's not like, hey, this is the problem, everybody pay attention to this. This is one particular problem that we're dealing with, and we do need to talk about it. But I think, what's key, and especially with our political discourse now, is people tend to be on one side of an issue or another. And with something like harmful algae blooms and how they occur, there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of people going to be affected by the problem and probably affected by whatever solution you come up with. So it's all about having that dialogue. And so, yeah, you have state agencies, you've got universities here, you've got environmental activists, you've got people that have, helped clean up this lake. We spent $70 million cleaning up this lake, talking about the work that they've done. So getting the public involved, having them meet these agencies that are responsible for overseeing many of these things, and having that back and forth. So the film is The Erie Situation. That's Erie, like Lake Erie, E-R-I-E. You can go to the film's website, theeriesituation.com. My company website is greatlakesOutreach.com. That's just more generally the work that we do in the region. You can also stay engaged through our various handles on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So this film, it had its debut last April at the Cleveland International Film Festival. It was invited. It was part of the global health competition there. It's a pretty big festival, and amazing to me, this was a great experience. It actually won the global health competition, from films in that competition from around the world. And since then, that opened a lot of doors. It's been to a lot of other film festivals. It was at the Detroit Free Press Film Festival where it got an award for journalistic excellence. And I've actually lost track of all the places that it's been. But mostly what we're getting now are community groups that are showing this at the local science museum, renting out a theater space and bringing in exactly what we're doing here, which is talking about this issue, maybe talking about the issue as it relates to Lake Erie, but then how does this relate to the community that we're in right now and having that conversation?
I'm Kathy Evans. I'm with the Muskegon Lake Watershed Partnership, and I'm a volunteer. Our group meets monthly to get public input on the things that we need to do to keep Muskegon Lake's water quality in good shape, fish and wildlife habitat. We're here tonight for the Muskegon Lake Avoiding an Erie Situation because we need a catalyst to kind of jumpstart a discussion about how we can start curbing the nutrients and stormwater runoff from affecting the quality of Muskegon Lake, and for that matter, all the lakes along Lake Michigan's eastern shoreline.
I'm Amber Kumpf. I'm the professor of geology and oceanography at Muskegon Community College. And the courses I teach are natural disasters, introduction to physical geology, earth history, so looking at big earth changes through time, and oceanography. Water quality everywhere is super important, and it's definitely a part of our lifeblood in Muskegon. The water provides tourism, but it also is our drinking water resource. So it's a double, this is really something that we need to care about. And it's a really tricky situation because we need food to eat. We have to feed people, and we need to grow crops to do that. So we need to have fertilizer and things like that to have a productive crop. But too much of that fertilizer can be a problem. And so that's kind of the movie tonight is about that. How do we balance the need to feed people with the hazardous consequences that can result from that? I teach kind of the geology end of things, but really environmental science is a biology, geology, chemistry, biogeochemistry problem as a whole. So at MCC, we do have an environmental science course that's taught out of the biology department, but it really is quite interdisciplinary. So if you're interested in going on into environmental science, you're passionate about protecting the place where we live, any introductory biology course, geology course, chemistry course, all that stuff will give you the foundation for moving on.
My name's Tom Jackson. I'm with the Annis Water Resource Institute at Grand Valley State University, located on the shores of beautiful Muskegon Lake here. I'm an instructor on the Jackson Research Vessel, and we take kids out and do hands-on science testing water quality here on Muskegon Lake and on Lake Michigan. So kids will make observations, conduct experiments, take measurements, collect data, analyze data, draw conclusions in real time with real world data right there here about water quality.
I'm Tom Willey, and I am a board member and the chairman of the PR committee at the Muskegon Lake Nature Preserve. It's in North Muskegon, 17 acres, and it's a beautiful area for biking, walking, families, fishermen. It's just a nice place to get away, and there's quite a bit of wildlife there as well. There's a quarter-mile river walk. It's right up against the Muskegon River. You can see Muskegon River, and then you can also see Muskegon Lake. There are 2 observation towers. There's an outdoor classroom for local school districts.
My name is Sabrina Butler. I am with Muskegon Conservation District. I am the invasive species technician, and I just want to show you the presentation that we have to offer today to contribute with the toxic algae bloom. So I brought in the Enviroscape to kind of show a little bit more of a demonstration of how pollution can contribute to the watershed and also affect the lakes that we have. And also some other different material of different different programs that we offer at Muskegon Conservation District. We have different for-hire programs, so if anyone had invasive species on their property and they wanted some help with eradicating that, we're the people that you can call and will help. We also have different other programs like our hunting program where we allow the community to come and help with hunting on our parcels to help with management. We also have some fundraisers that we have to offer that includes our tree seedling sale and also our perennial sale that we offer every year.
Please, we ask, do not take any video of the film itself tonight. You can take video of the panelists if you want, but not the film. It's a special screening, and it's not done being shown around the world. Following the film, We will have an opportunity for audience participation with a panel of experts moderated by Dr. Alan Steinman with Grand Valley State University and its Water Resources. And we also want to thank our sponsors and funders for the program with the West Michigan Shoreline Regional Development Commission, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Great Lakes Outreach Media, and Muskegon Community College, and Plastics Oceans for their funding support. So to kick off our program and to provide some more background on himself and the film, it is my honor to introduce the filmmaker, David Ruck. He is a native of Muskegon area. He has worked for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and he and his company, the Great Lakes Outreach Media, also created Muskegon Lake Back from the Brink, a film screening we had here a few years ago. And so please join me in a warm welcome for David Ruck.
Testing 1, 2. How's everybody doing? Thank you so much for coming out. We were so worried this morning that we would have to postpone or cancel this thing because of, well, we're in Michigan. And it's just a real humbling honor to look out here and see so many people showing up. So thank you again. Round of applause for the people that made it out here. We did have a couple folks, some from Manistee and some from Lansing, that rather than take the risk had to stay back, but the rest of you are here, so thank you. I'm a Great Lakes guy. I grew up on Lake Michigan. It's always just sort of been a spiritual, an artistic, like a family member, really, to me. And by extension, the rest of the Great Lakes. And I'm sure that there's other people in this room that probably have similar stories to that. And that when you're by these bodies of water, they talk to you, they teach you things, they calm your mind, they reconnect you, they bring balance to your life. And in the case of the storytelling that I've focused on, I've always just been really interested in how human beings are impacting our planet, how we're impacting our waterways, and trying to find the human stories to really shine a light on often very complex issues. And in the case of harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie, it's a very dynamic issue, as you're going to see in the film. And so, as Kathy Evans mentioned, it's 600 square miles of algae bloom was during the year 2019 when we were filming this, which, obviously anyone knows if you ever go out on the lake, you can maybe see 12 miles in any direction. 600 square miles of toxic green scum filling one of our Great Lakes. But back here in October of 2021, I was hanging out with my dog at Max McKee's property over there next to Mart Dock, and a place I just go all the time and run her out there. And I was sitting in the car like eating a sandwich and just letting her run around. And then I go up to the water that she's drinking out of, and I start to see this glistening green little shimmer in the water. And the first thing I think is, oh shit, because I know exactly what that is. And it was a cyanobacterial bloom. I immediately threw my dog in the car and raced to the emergency vet in Grand Rapids, because I just didn't know whether that was a toxic bloom. You don't know until you test it. But I do know that if it is, I got an hour to get my dog to the vet before I'm saying goodbye to my dog. And that's the thing with this stuff. It's a fascinating life form, cyanobacteria. You can have a huge bloom like you do in Lake Erie, and it might not be that toxic. Or you can have a tiny, barely, like you won't even, unless you really know what you're looking for, like we had in Muskegon Lake, you can have this little shimmer in the water. And the scientists at NOAA told me it was 100 times more toxic than the average toxicity in Lake Erie. And that was in Muskegon Lake, right off of Mart Dock. in October of 2021. So we're going to show you a film about Lake Erie, but this is, as we'll discuss more with the panel, it's a problem that's emerging throughout the world. We have cyanobacteria to thank for giving us 21% of the world's oxygen, and it pretty much annihilated itself for the most part by poisoning itself with what it gave off, which was oxygen as a waste product. But we're doing things to the environment now that are causing it to return in ways that are impacting human health and the environment. So thanks for coming out. I give you the Erie situation. This is Muskegon Lake. This is last August off of Parmenter O'Toole. This is cyanobacterial bloom, if you're looking for some context. So enjoy the film. I think you'll be entertained. I think you'll learn something. And I look forward to hearing your questions at the end. Thanks for coming out.
Well, it's great to see everybody here. My name is Al Steinman. I am the research professor at the Annis Water Resources Institute. I'm used to saying I'm the director, but I stepped down in August, and I'm really glad I did. Let me first set the stage before I introduce our distinguished panel. Muskegon Lake is on the cusp of being delisted as a Great Lakes area of concern. Hopefully it'll be done this year, maybe next year. We've lived with that stigma for over 40 years as an AOC, and when we do get delisted, it's going to be a cause for some serious celebration in this town. But we still face the risk of harmful algal blooms, as Dave alluded to before he showed the film. So this evening, what we'd like to do is, after seeing the social, economic, and ecological impacts that harmful algal blooms caused in western Lake Erie, I want us to ask ourselves and ask the panel, is Muskegon Lake at the risk of being a mini Lake Erie? If so, what can we do to prevent these effects, and what are the human and environmental risks associated with blooms here? And even if not, what action should we take to make sure Muskegon Lake remains free of risk, especially in the face of climate change? We have assembled this awesome panel of 5 experts to provide insights to these questions. I want to briefly introduce each of them and then ask them to explain how their expertise relates to the issue of harmful algal blooms, particularly with respect to Muskegon Lake. So first, on the far right, is Tom Zimnicki. Tom is the Agricultural and Restoration Policy Director at the Alliance for the Great Lakes. He previously worked for the Michigan Department of Agriculture as a policy advisor and as a program director for the Michigan Environmental Council. Tom served on numerous advisory councils that influence agricultural management practices, and also has served on the Water Use Advisory Council for the state of Michigan. He currently oversees the Alliance's work across the Great Lakes Basin related to agriculture and source water, and Tom and the Alliance recently published reports detailing the costs of harmful algal blooms for municipal ratepayers and the scale of investment needed to address water quality goals in the basin. To Tom's left of me, to your right of Tom, is Kathy Moore. Kathy serves as the Public Health Director and Executive Health Officer for Muskegon County. In this role, she's empowered to oversee the regulations to prevent disease, promote health, and protect the environment. I might just say as an aside, there's probably no position that's more volatile these days than a health department director, and we are very fortunate to have Kathy at the helm of Muskegon County's health department. I think all we need to do is look to our south to Ottawa County to recognize how volatile things are there. She's a proud graduate of the University of Michigan for the School of Public Health, and she's also Grand Valley State University grad in accounting and Muskegon Community College for the big triumvirate where she got her associate's degree in accounting. To my left of Kathy is Dave, and of course we know about Dave, but let me just briefly give you a little more information about him. Dave's been making films about science for over 20 years, and we all know he's a fabulous storyteller. Really, I think, he calls himself a filmmaker, but I like to think of him as a storyteller. His first documentary was titled "This Is Not a Chocolate Factory," about the Hooker factory up in Montague and their nefarious practices. His thesis film at American University in Washington, D.C. was "I Want to Be an Astronaut," and it's had its debut on the International Space Station and subsequently toured the country. He's worked for several years at NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, and he spent a lot of time as an underwater cinematographer in the ocean and the Great Lakes, and he founded Great Lakes Outreach Media. As president and producer of that organization, Dave continues to work regularly with NOAA, the scientific community, as well as PBS in communicating stories focused on science in the Great Lakes, and I'm proud to call him a friend. To Dave's left is Bill Beaubier, and we're very happy to have Bill here. For those of you who go to Sweetwater Market, you know Bill and Earthscapes Farm. But he's also been a state representative, a lobbyist, he doesn't always like to hear that, and a consultant among his many vocations. He is truly a Renaissance man. Most significantly, last October marked 50 years since he and his wife Patrice bought a camp counselor's cabin and had it moved to the clearing on the 40 acres that he owns up in Oceana County. Dave maintains a farm that he farms organically. He has cattle and compost. He gardens in the front yard. He manages their forest for heat and building materials, and in the meantime has raised their 2 kids and added on to the house and to the farm at least 6 times. And then on my far left is Kathy Evans. We all know Kathy, a lifelong Muskegon area resident. She's worked for the Muskegon Conservation District and Windsor Dick. She's recently retired, although she continues to volunteer in our community, and we all benefit from that. Her work for the past 30 years has focused on improving the environment in West Michigan, and in particular, the development of local, state, and federal partnerships and projects to restore the natural resources in the Muskegon Lake area of concern. And if there's any one individual who's most responsible for us being on the cusp of delisting, it's Kathy Evans. So we are very fortunate to have these panelists with us today, and I want to start off by asking each of them, and I'll start with Tom, given your expertise, what do you think about the problems in Lake Erie and how can that relate to what's going on here in Muskegon Lake, Muskegon County, and indeed this whole side of the state?
Yeah, okay, cool. And first off, I just want to say thanks to everybody that stuck around. I was a little worried after the film got done that everybody was going to jet, so give yourselves another round of applause for sticking around. Also, it was nice, made my drive from Lansing worth it. Film was great, first time seeing it, and I think hit on a lot of important points that are transferable here. I think a couple that maybe I would want to look at are and we heard this from the mayor in Toledo, this kind of default approach to externalize the costs of pollution to other communities and downstream ratepayers is something that we've seen pretty prevalently in Ohio and in Toledo. Last year, the Alliance, we put out a report that showed that Toledo residents are paying close to $100 extra a year just to deal with the HAB portion of their drinking water bill. And so these are real costs to consumers and to ratepayers. And so I think as we look at issues on this side of the state, both from a water quality and a water quantity standpoint, I think understanding kind of how our actions or how actions of certain industries, how those are going to impact communities around them. I mean, that's true in Lake Erie, that's true on this side of the state.
Thanks, Tom. Kathy?
Public health works with the state departments, mainly Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, as well as Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, in partnership with Grand Valley State University to test our Great Lakes and inland lakes for harmful algae blooms. And depending on the results of those samples collected, Public Health has the authority to issue advisories, closures, and public messaging around the results.
Dave?
I said a lot at the beginning of this, so I'm going to save time, probably just pass it on. I'm just grateful you're all sticking around. Hope you enjoyed the film.
Dave, before you pass it on, there is one question that is so pressing, directed at you. You must answer this. Is your dog okay?
My dog is okay. My dog is okay. They induced vomiting. And, you know, that's the thing, like the vets are only just now becoming aware of this issue in the area. You know, whenever I go to the vet, I bring a photograph or something like that. So it's one of these things where, I'm hoping an event like this will contribute to some of that awareness, but, bring it up with your vet. Mine in particular, when I sent these photographs of what was going on in the lake, they were like, oh yeah, I was duck hunting and I saw that stuff and I'd have no idea what it was, and So there's still a lot of education that needs to be done, even of the folks that, you know, are going to be intervening if something does happen, like to your pet.
Let's just do
This one.
that. I'll tell you, it's a lot different being out there than it is up here. For one thing, there's an echo for those of us that are up here that is sort of stadium-like.
Bill, stay focused.
Yeah,
Stay focused.
so forgive me if I, and he warned me.
It didn't
Al
take
said,
long,
be
did it?
succinct. All right. So we've been farming the same piece of ground. Well, we've been in the same spot for 50 years. And, you know, I kind of like to thank the Garden Club and Rachel Carson, because they're really the ones that started us off. Because we knew we wanted a better life and a better lifestyle. And there were some old ladies with an herb club, and they really pushed us in the right direction by showing us their garden. One of them even gave us our first goat. So we moved north with the commune, you know, 40 acres, the homestead, the whole works. And we've been in the same spot the whole time doing essentially the same thing. We garden in the front yard, the woods is around us, and that's our source of heat. But 50 years is a long time, and we can observe a lot. We farmed organically the whole time. I fooled around a little bit with commercial fertilizer, and probably had the right idea. I thought I'd try and grow some organic matter, but it didn't last very long. We didn't want to spend the money, for one thing. But the fact of the matter is that we grew our farm, and what the farmers, the organic farmer in the movie said was all true, and that is that it takes a while to build that soil up, but once you get it, you know, we see it. Healthy soil, healthy animals, healthy humans. And that's the whole thing. But the issue with the watershed, boy, we got them. You know, the crop rotation used to have a lot more straw in it. There used to be a lot smaller farms. The manure problem was easily dealt with, not easily. I had a sore back for many years, and then I got a loader tractor. But the fact of the matter is we're all eating, and that we have, through economics or however you want to lay the blame, we have taken the farmer off the farm and put him in a factory. And I see those honey buckets, or whatever you want to call them, now pulled by 8-wheel drive tractors, now driving their manure 20 miles away. And it's pretty distressing to see that has happened. I wish I had a simple solution. What I do is very personal, and I know that it takes a lot of energy to do that. And so I don't have much more to say. Probably
That's
says.
That's good, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you
Kathy?
for being here.
Let's try that.
Just in case. Hi, I'm Kathy Evans, and I'm here because of my role really with the cleanup of Muskegon Lake, but I also worked for the Regional Planning Office here, WMSRDC, West Michigan Shoreline Regional Development Commission, and had responsibilities for the watersheds and water bodies, you know, in 5 counties in West Michigan. And I think what's really important is to bring together stakeholders, you know, with different backgrounds around a common problem, but also to have a plan in place that can guide you to set goals and targets. That's what we did for Muskegon Lake with the area of concern. We spent over $80 million cleaning up a problem that was already out there, though. And so my interest here is to get ahead of the game a little bit here in West Michigan and make sure that this doesn't happen to Muskegon Lake. After all the investment we put into cleaning it up, it would be a real shame to see algae cause a problem for us, so we can't recreate in the lake, so we can't fish, so we can't, so you know, it would hurt tourism, economic development. So we really want to get ahead of this before it could be too late, right? I think we really need a plan though. Muskegon Lake has a watershed. That's the land around the lake that drains off stormwater runoff and comes into the creeks that flow into the lake. And in Muskegon County, in that part of the watershed, we do not have a watershed management plan that has been recognized by the state and federal governments as eligible for implementation funding to do the work on the ground, whether it's on a farm or whether it's in an urban area. We don't have a plan like that, which we didn't, I'm not saying we didn't try to get funding to get a plan like that, but we were never able to get that level of plan funded through grant proposals. And part of it, I think, is because we were an area of concern and we were getting lots of money, over $80 million to clean up the lake. So, you know, well, we're like every other water body. You know, we're having nutrients coming in from throughout the watershed that have nothing to do with our historic reasons for being an area of concern, right? We have a beneficial use impairment called eutrophication and undesirable algae. And we've done a lot of work to address that within the area of concern boundary, and to address the historic reasons for that being part of why we're an area of concern. But we're done with that work. And now we have this more ubiquitous global problem happening. So I would really like to see us get that plan funded and get that in place so we can start bringing those stakeholders together around a common problem like we did with the area of concern. And that's going to take many years. But the biggest challenge we have right now, it's even worse than it was when we tried to get funding. The state doesn't give you funding for that anymore. If you can get local funding to develop a watershed management plan, they will review it and approve it. So that's where we are in this community right now, is we're going to have to raise non-federal, non-state dollars just for a plan. And the plan will identify the sources and the causes of the problem throughout our watershed. Some of them will be from agricultural areas, some of them will be from urban areas and other places. But that's how you get the money to implement the work that has to be done on the ground, and that's what I'm really interested in seeing happen.
How much money do you need?
A really good plan for the whole watershed within Muskegon County, it would be, you know, maybe $80,000, something like that. Got to go out and do samples. We don't want a plan that's just on paper. We want to really pinpoint the problem sources. It takes time and money and sampling and things like that, not just kind of a GIS desktop version. You have to do that too, but there are a lot of steps. You could probably do a smaller watershed like Stony Creek for $40,000. That's just spitballing.
Get to it now.
Sorry, Dave. I have a lot of different questions here. The first one, I'm going to throw back at Kathy if she knows this, and maybe Tom knows this. How many CAFOs are there operating in Muskegon and Kent counties? Do you know that offhand?
Well, I don't know the Muskegon County answer. I did take a look at the watershed, and boy, you know, this is Muskegon River is a, you know, very long watershed, gets skinny in spots. But fortunately, there's a lot of forest that it goes through, but there are a lot of CAFOs, and we see operations getting bigger. Till I looked at the map, I didn't, excuse me, I didn't realize I'm in the White River watershed, and I didn't realize how close those two, how in the Fremont area, for me, is where I see the CAFOs. There's some turkey farms, mostly they're composting, but boy, those big dairies, they are running their shit down the road to my neighborhood. And I think part of it is source identification. They're spreading it now on about 120 acres. It's about 3/4 of a mile away, and I bet there's nobody that samples Newman Creek before it's spread and after it's spread. Now they put it on and they work it in and they put corn on it, and then after the corn is chopped off in the fall, they come back and they put it on again and they grow another crop. and they chop that off early in the spring. It's a winter grain. And they could be testing, but they're new to my neighborhood.
Bill, the question was how many numbers?
I'm not sure countywide. Statewide, we hover between like 280 and 300. The big pockets of those are kind of this west side of the state, south, central, southeast, and then up in the thumb near Saginaw Bay, or in Saginaw Bay.
We definitely have a few turkey CAFOs in the upper part of our watershed here in Muskegon. So the next question is to perhaps, Dave, I'm going to throw it at you, and you can throw it back at me if you want. What is causing the Muskegon lake blooms that you referred to in October of 2021 with the very high concentrations of toxins?
I am going to throw that back to you, Al, because you're the scientist.
I wanted to give you your due. So as was alluded to by the NOAA and GLERL folks, harmful algal blooms, they need nutrients. They need phosphorus and nitrogen. So it's not just focused on phosphorus. In the Erie Basin it is, but they'll soon find out that pretty much when you have too much phosphorus, then the algae become nitrogen limited. And so the cyanobacteria, some of the cyanobacteria are capable of fixing atmospheric nitrogen. So they don't need nitrogen runoff, but some can't. The main species, the microcystis, that forms microcystins, and I apologize for the terminology, but I didn't make it up. So the genus is Microcystis, they form microcystins. That genus is not capable of fixing atmospheric nitrogen. But Planktothrix, another genus that does form toxins, can fix atmospheric nitrogen. But if you can't, then you have to get it from the runoff. And so phosphorus, nitrogen, warm temperatures, and then calm winds, because the blooms in general need calm winds, particularly the surface scums that form, that look really gross. Now, in Muskegon Lake, one of the problems is that some of the genera that are growing, the harmful algal blooms that are growing, actually grow throughout the entire water column. So a lot of turbulence will not disrupt the scum and cause the bloom to go away. It actually will stimulate them because now they're going down into the lower waters where there's more nutrients. So that's really what causes it. We need to control the nutrients. Obviously, we can't affect the temperature and the wind that's going on here, but then we all can do our part with respect to climate change. And the best thing that I would recommend you can do for climate change as an individual is vote wisely, okay? So we'll go on. Bill, I'm going to throw this to you. How does a small farmer go to organic farming without losing the farm?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
Sorry.
Organic without losing the farm.
Can you go to organic without? Slowly, I would say. And you know, we've really done it all over the course of years. I mean, we're down to a herd of cattle and 6 chickens right now, but have a big garden, but we've done it all. And it requires real concentration on cropping. Cover crops are absolutely essential because we're relying on the air for nitrogen. We're relying on the bacteria in the ground to fix that nitrogen. We use that in the crops. In the crops, the succulent crops go down, put carbon back in the soil, have more bacteria, more mycorrhizal fungi. All those things that make the soil alive take time to develop, and can you do it without losing the farm? Well, we did it. We always had to have outside work in order to support our farming habit, but it paid off, I think. The community, the neighborhood is healthy, the kids are good, the land looks good, and you know, there's no easy solution. The solution has to come, it's multifaceted, and of course you're part of that solution, and you have to pay attention to what you eat and where it comes from. And that's part of the solution, that's the biggest part. But I am glad to say over 50 years, people know what organic means now. They even sell it in Walmart.
Thanks, Bill.
Can I just add one thing
Please.
to that? You know, when in the film where there's that soil health social, the guy Rick, who everybody's kind of there to listen to, and he's like, you know, this is we're bluntly trying to save the planet. He's a guy from Indiana who was in the process of converting 5,000 conventional acres over to 5,000 organic acres. And what he was doing was maybe like 500 acres a year.
At a time.
You know, and then, you know, over 5 years, then the first group of 500 acres is now full organic. But, you know, that's somebody with a huge operation who's got conventional farm dollars paying for the farm while other acres are not full-on certified organic yet. So not every farmer has that luxury of being able to have so many acres that they're farming to support the acres that they're converting over to organic.
So we should support our organic farmers is really what it comes down
And
to.
specifically soil health organic farmers, the soil health nuts.
So,
Like this guy.
So aside from, I think, converting over to full organic, I mean, even farms that I've been working with, talking with for years now that are kind of on this journey towards soil health and more regen farming, and there's a real struggle to find the technical expertise. There's a struggle to find state and federal programs that help support some of that. And so a lot of farmers, what we find that are kind of in this like soil health network, get a lot of their technical information from other farmers on Twitter and other and at conferences and stuff, because we don't necessarily have the resources at extension and state agencies to be able to do that. And so as people convert over, whether it's going over to organic or whether it's just trying to kind of diversify their operation, we need to make sure that we have the resources and the personnel in place that can help them on that journey.
Thanks, Tom. Kathy Moore, I have a question for you. Hopefully you can answer this. How well equipped is the City of Muskegon's water treatment plant in detecting potential harmful algal blooms? And are we concerned about that from a human health perspective here in Muskegon County? How are we addressing that?
So the municipalities actually pull samples every day. Public health gets a report monthly, but if the results of the daily samples indicate any issues, and it's nitrate, phosphorus, any other chemical, they respond right away. I just recently reviewed those, two municipal reports, City of Muskegon Heights and City of Muskegon, and just very proud of the attention that their public works staff is giving to the testing, and really proud of the results. And we're also checking for other chemicals as well.
Thank you, appreciate that. Kathy Evans. Kathy, I have a bunch of questions here dealing with the fact that Muskegon Lake's main problem, according to some of the people in the audience, is overdevelopment and the lack of shoreline access. So can you address that, please?
Yeah, I would say in about 2019, the Muskegon Lake Watershed Partnership started looking real closely at the public access properties that we have on the lake, and many of them were developed for motorized boating, not very many kayak launches. There were a few places where you could shore fish, cast a line from shore, pull up if you were maybe, hard, pressed for mobility, where you could actually park near the shore, but not that many. But there were a lot of publicly owned pieces of land that were, maybe somewhat developed for public outdoor recreation, but were really lacking. And so we did do some meetings and took input from the public about what they thought was most useful when it comes to these different public access places like Heritage Landing and Grand Trunk and Fisherman's Landing and Hartshore Marina and JC Launch Ramp and all these places. And it looks like, hey, we're in pretty good shape. We have a lot of places, but they are all, maybe not currently under the threat of conversion, but some of them are under the threat of conversion to other uses. I think what we need to do as a community is really be really involved in all of the meetings that we have at the Planning Commission level when it comes to development of the shoreline of Muskegon Lake, and let your voice be heard about what you think and what you need. Development of the shoreline is great. You know, we're welcoming that. We've transitioned from a very heavy industrial shoreline to a lot of vacant brownfields, to restoration and a much nicer looking area with a Lakeshore Trail bike path, you know, traveling a lot right along the shoreline. And people love that. And so in our rush to a new age, from lumbering to industry to cleanup and now public outdoor recreation, tourism, and more economic development, we need to pay attention because we could lose a lot of what we really value very quickly. The real economic benefit is of various types of land uses along the shoreline of Muskegon Lake. Do we want a working waterfront? Do we want to maintain space for that? Do we want charter fishing? Do we want, you know, public access? Do we want condominiums and restaurants and, you know, all of that? So there are some ways to determine what those economic benefits are for a community in the long term. Sometimes it's very surprising because a lot of times we rush to the condominium and residential uses, and in reality, when you have a public access shoreline that everyone in your community can enjoy, whether you live, you know, 20 feet from the lake or a mile from the lake shore, from the shoreline, communities end up with more tax base when they have public access because everyone's property values go up a little. And there's many, many, many more people living in your city than those you can fit right on the shoreline. So that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you. And, you know, one thing that we want to mention is not just economic benefits, but often there's mental, physical benefits associated with the green space as people access those areas. And that's been quantified as well. Thanks, Kathy. Do you want to talk a little about what the Watershed Partnership's doing with respect to the Public Access Committee? Or would you? Yeah,
the Watershed Partnership, Muskegon Lake Watershed Partnership, has a Public Access to Natural Resources Committee. We're talking about, you know, the public's ability to interact with the lake, with the natural resources, outdoor recreation, those kinds of public access uses. I know sometimes, you know, people think, well, it's a nice restaurant, but not everyone goes to restaurants, you know. So we're really focused on the natural resources part of public access and how we can recreate with the lake. And so we meet fairly regularly. I want to say the next meeting is on a Wednesday. Does anyone remember the date?
Fallon.
So we can find out that, though, by emailing Fallon at info@muskegonlake.org. And if you'd like to get on that, we have a Zoom meeting and sometimes an in-person meeting with our Public Access Committee. And you're all invited to participate in those.
Thank you, Kathy. Tom, I'm going to throw this one at you. It's a little bit coming from a different angle. There are also activists working to mitigate and reduce the huge factory farms from the perspective of animal abuse. Is there a possible alliance there, and do you have any experience in that area?
So I have not and don't work directly around kind of the animal rights, animal kind of advocacy lens of it. I think there are some, like the end goal is common, or as a common goal. Some of the tactics and frankly the messaging around it are quite divergent of one another. I think unfortunately that side of pushing for kind of the reduction in livestock operations and the CAFO model gives a lot of ammunition to the industry to kind of paint everybody that is trying to change the system as this like pitchfork and torch picture, and that's not necessarily the view I hold on it, but that is kind of the common mantra out there among the industry. And so I think to the question, being better coordinated and figuring out where some of those synergies are, I think the onus is on obviously the advocacy community to be better lined up on that. So a direct but an indirect experience with that.
Okay, thank you. Dave, I have a question for you that's from me. Obviously your film had the potential to rile up different sectors in the Lake Erie Basin. Did you experience any pushback as part of this film? And if so, what was the nature of that?
Did I get any pushback when I shot when it premiered at the Cleveland International Film Festival? It wasn't 24 hours before the Ohio Farm Bureau had written a 1,500-word essay where they concluded that my film was unconscionable and without merit. Which, honestly, I put that up on the wall right next to the awards and accolades that the film is receiving. Because if you're pissing off the Ohio Farm Bureau, chances are you're doing something right. Yeah, so, I mean, my goal, you know, like you mentioned at the beginning or when you introduced me was, you know, I worked for National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I used to be in a cube farm full of scientists, you know, who study everything from whales to coral, et cetera, and interacting with the scientific community throughout the Great Lakes. You know, it was really important to me that the science in this film is looked at thoroughly and passes muster. I didn't want, you know, scientists watching this film and being, you know, cringing, like, oh my gosh, this is, Michael Moore made this movie or something. You know, so that was really important to me. So when I hear, it's sort of like the mayor, you know, it's like I would expect a lobbyist from an industry causing a deadly problem to doubt the science. So those are the kinds of things that I hear every now and then. But then I also got an email like a week ago from the Ohio Farm Bureau saying that now they want to show the film to their constituents. And I'm like, good luck with that. Because you know, the view I had in reading the things that they wrote was, it's, number one, they could have watched the film, they may not have. I couldn't tell based on reading their phlegm that they spewed on this website of theirs. But what I knew that they were trying to do was drive a wedge between the agricultural community who listens to them and the film. They basically didn't want them to see this, because heaven forbid you start to have an engaged, informed conversation about the problem as it's taking place. So it's an interesting evolution to see them, you know, come around and take the risk. I can't see what could go wrong with this, of showing this to their constituents. So, I mean, to me, that's progress. You know, Ohio has a lot of problems to deal with, you know, not the least of which is a railroad accident, you know, that is on the national news right now. So I hope they start to get their act together down there.
Thanks, Dave. This question is sort of for everybody. It's sort of the elephant in the room when we talk about this issue. We've been looking at BMPs and voluntary incentives for the last 50 years, and as they mentioned in your film, conditions really haven't improved. So is it time for regulation? Is it time for enforcement? Or is that just not feasible?
Well, in Michigan, to avoid regulation, we instituted through the Department of Agriculture, Michigan Department of Agriculture, Michigan Agricultural Environmental Assurance Program. MEAP is what we call it for short. But we were looking at Ohio when we were doing that, because it looked like they were growing so fast they were really going to, they don't have, for one thing, Ohio doesn't regulate the Clean Water Act through state government. Michigan has that jurisdiction, and I think New Jersey, and there may be one more. So it was sort of like, are we going to do this? Try and do these stewardship practices ourselves, or are we going to wait and let the big daddy in Washington come down and tell us how to do it? Well, it's worked pretty well. I mean, there are sure a lot of bigger farms out there that I don't see a MEAP sign in front of. But I have to say, over time, that I have seen way more emphasis from the farm community on soil health, planting cover crops, doing things right. I mean, I lived in a part of the world where it's sandy, and boy, May would come and those asparagus fields would be blowing 2 sections away. I mean, it was bad. And that aspect of it, keeping the ground covered, watching how they manage, in my neck of the woods, cherry orchards, where they strip crop, grass between them, and yeah, they're still using herbicides under the tree, but it's a way different culture.
Yet Bill, and Bill's given me latitude to cut him off. I just want to make it clear, I'm not being rude here. We still have harmful algal blooms. In fact, they're getting worse in the state of Michigan. So if in fact the MEEP program is working, it's not manifesting itself in terms of water quality.
Well, and we don't actually know if it's working, right? Because we don't have any, the problem with that, with MEEP and with OACI, which is kind of the Ohio equivalent of it, and other efforts across the country, is that we're not really able to quantify any kind of water quality benefits that we get from these programs. And so we spend a lot of money and time to promote these things. We put signs out, we give people gold stars, and like we should be doing those practices, but we shouldn't, that's like the end of the conversation for folks, is we say, okay, we've done this, we've done kind of the minimal amount of conservation and environmental stewardship, and then it's like, great, now you can walk away from it. And what we're seeing is that those practices, which again, there are good things within MEEP, obviously it's good to be planting cover crops and it's good to be reducing tillage, but what we're seeing in like at the scale of Lake Erie, for instance, is that those practices, we functionally cannot get there with those types of practices. The scale of implementation that is needed, the money that is required for it, we are, I think, unlikely to get there through best management practices. And so we need to be looking more seriously at, like from a livestock side, do we put in municipal grade wastewater treatment plants? I mean, one livestock facility generates the same amount of waste on an annual basis as any medium or large municipality. And those municipalities put waste through a treatment facility. Why don't we do that on the livestock side? You know, putting more land into wetlands and into features that can control both water from a quantity standpoint, but also from a water quality standpoint. I mean, like, these are big, not only financial discussions that need to be had, but political ones too, because then you start talking about taking land out of production, and we start talking about, you know, requiring farms to send waste to a wastewater facility. Those things get really contentious. And I think, and this is now, and then I'll get off my box, but I think my concern, not only in Lake Erie, but any like inland water body throughout the basin, is that this like bar for public acceptance, that like this is just the level of pollution that we have, and the lake turns green, and we can't swim there, we can't fish there, that bar of acceptance is lower than any kind of political will that it's going to take to actually change that issue and change that problem.
Thanks, Tom. Another point associated with that is if we start going to these public work projects to treat the waste, then basically we're giving the farmers or whoever is polluting the waterways a pass, because we're treating the symptom, not the disease. Sure. And so how do we make sure, if we do that, that people are held accountable? Dave?
Yeah, I kind of want to step back a little bit from that, because you're really what we're talking about is regulating something that we allow to happen in the first place. Right. You know, and you're sort of like, let's pass laws to try and change what we've made legal over here. And really what I'm not pointing at you. But where does that begin? That begins with the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is what's second to the defense bill in terms of how much money we spend every year. And I think it's this year that it's up for reevaluation. It's like every 4 or 5 years. 5 years. 5 years-ish. And that's a $450 billion, $460 billion bill that basically determines how we grow our food and how we feed the country. School lunches are in there. You know, a lot of incentives to grow corn for ethanol and animal feed. What what is also in there, because the soil health folks have been screaming and somebody wants to shut them up, is of that $450 billion, they've decided in this next iteration of the Farm Bill that they're going to put $2.8 billion in there to incentivize soil health and sustainable farming. How in the hell is that going to move people who are absorbing all of this federal assistance to grow corn for animal feed to be like, you know, I like this money over here, but boy, I mean, I'm going to try and dip into that little $2.8 billion to you know, quit doing all these terrible things that I've been doing and start to grow things a different way. I hate to use words like this and go this way down the discussion, but the Farm Bill is racist. It is incentivizing old white dudes that have been farming for forever to continue doing things on the land that are causing these problems in the water and elsewhere. There's very little in there to help new farmers get their footing underneath them. Farmers, just take farming in general. The career with the highest rate of suicide of any profession on the planet. Their kids don't want to do this stuff anymore. They're barely, if you're a small farmer, you have no control over the market. So land consolidation, going more towards these huge agro firms, and you know, the Farm Bill then telling those folks that are willing to play that game, like, and you're going to grow food a certain way. So before we talk about like regulating, you know, like what's going on, why don't we start at the beginning, which is reevaluate how we write the Farm Bill and start like saying like, you know, why don't we start growing our food in a different way?
Well, and those same programs within the Farm Bill are created they create this perverse incentive for farmers to take riskier and riskier management decisions, because there is that insurance, that publicly subsidized insurance, that if that crop fails on land that they probably shouldn't be growing on anyway, they'll still get paid out for it. And so it is just the snake continuing to eat itself, right?
It's more environmentally friendly to drill for oil. It's more environmentally friendly to drill for oil and refine that and put it in your car and drive a gasoline car than it is to grow corn. You know, you're going to harvest this with diesel tractors and diesel equipment. You're then going to apply energy to it to turn it into ethanol, and then you're going to add it to gasoline. So you're basically burning fuel to grow fuel, and then burning more fuel to turn that damn crop into an additive for gasoline. It is a jobs program. That is all it is. It is a jobs program. It makes no sense. You're better off drilling for oil.
You're also not accounting for the water and nutrients that go in to grow the corn to begin with.
So just to claim my innocence, my participation in the farm programs has been about this much. I planted a windbreak, and they came out and checked my windbreak out and said, well, you needed to use some herbicides because these trees can't compete with that grass. And I didn't do that. And they had a program for fencing off woodlot, and I was glad to get 3 strands of barbed wire and do my own labor. I could just about pay for the wire with their program. We did that, and then they came, I don't know which recession it was probably the early 70s, and they came through and went, that fence shouldn't be there, that program shouldn't have paid for this fence, and, you know, tried to squeeze whatever it was, $200 back out of me or something. So that was early in my life, and I am a non-participant. But I have participated pretty much on at least the last 3 farm bills, working for, in one case, environmental defense, always for the conservation districts. On the conservation, when WTO came in, there was a lot of questions. The world trade, but what it did do was it eliminated the direct subsidy for crops. So there needed to be another way to get money to the farm community, and the growth of the conservation aspect, that title grew a lot. And I say hats off to Senator Stabenow. She was great to work with. We got the CREP program in. We got conservation security programs. They changed the school lunch program, which was always these white flour commodities. That changed a lot. There's been a lot of good changes out there. It comes incrementally. It doesn't come overnight. If we want to look at models, we can look at Europe. They've done, depending on where you're looking, they've done some pretty good things, but boy, it's a different world. We have all this vast land, and by golly, it's, you know, it's like a magnet. Once you get power, you get more power, and that's, I in my lifetime have watched farms go from Charlie Lyon saying, you know, that damn banker, he wants me to get 100 cows and then he'll loan me money. I'm sure Charlie Lyon has been gone for about 20 or 30 years because those farms are really big now. There aren't a lot of 100 cow dairies out there, and that's why their manure has got to go 20 miles away to get spread.
Thanks, Bill. Public service announcement here. Public access to the Shoreline Committee is meeting on March 2nd at 6 p.m. at Windsor-Dick's offices, and they'll also focus on outreach information about algae as necessary. So, all right, got that done. Here's an interesting question, maybe Tom, maybe Bill. What has the greater impact, organic versus conventional farming, or converting to a vegetarian/vegan diet and reducing feedlots?
As a beef farmer, and it's not a big herd, we've got like 24 cows. I think we got 12 calves on the ground right now. What I have seen is the change in the ground from having animals and their manure. We took a burnt out farm, absolutely farmed out. Well, I used to grow some pretty good corn there. Well, we took that farm, took a long time to do it, but it's all growing grass now. The farm is in grass and trees, except now we raised vegetables for many years. We're down to just a garden in the front yard. And I think people who live in urban areas should eat less meat. I'm not sure when you do the final protein ratio out there, and I have seen it in New Zealand studies, I have seen that if we all went vegan or vegetarian, if we all went that way, then the amount of cropland does not decrease necessarily, because you will be eating more grain to get the amount of protein that you can get that complements it from a little dairy or chicken or fish or whatever. And I think it's a whole system that works, and I think we're seeing it in not just the ag community, but when you break the components out and don't understand what its effect has on the rest of it, I think that's sort of creates this bad cycle.
Thanks, Bill. Tom, do you have anything?
I think it depends on what your goal is. You know, from like an environmental standpoint, I know a lot of farmers that aren't organic and are doing more for soil health and like have more complex systems than some other farmers that I know that are organic. Like going vegan or vegetarian, I'm a vegetarian, so like speaking from experience, right? Like I don't know, you can do that for other reasons too. There is a lot of science and there are a lot of studies out there that show the value of livestock integration from a soil health standpoint, and from like kind of an ecosystem benefit standpoint. And so I don't think it's necessarily like a binary, pick one or the other. I think the most important thing is like understanding your role as a consumer in the food system. And I think just the fact that somebody is asking that question of like this one or that one, you're already thinking about how can I, like through my dollar, indicate what my priorities are from like a global standpoint.
Thanks, Tom. Applause for our panel and their excellent answers. I have one more question, and I have one from the audience, apparently.
Not a question, a suggestion.
Please.
You're viewing manure as a pollution, and you should view it as a resource.
Yes.
We should compact it, dry it, and burn it so that we can heat houses and cities.
For those who couldn't hear, our audience member was suggesting we use manure as a resource, not as a pollutant.
And then it won't pollute as much, it won't pollute the water. We can burn it clean like they do in Grand Rapids. In Grand Rapids, they built an incinerator that heats the downtown. And it's clean burning. So all you have to do is dry it, compact it, bale it, bring it to an incinerator, and it's out of the system.
I think there's some of that in Wisconsin as well.
So one more question. I apologize if I didn't get to everybody's questions, but I did my best. Kathy Moore, this is for you. How has PFAS chemicals affected us, and is it a problem in our region?
So we do have concentrations of high PFAS levels in certain areas, and one of the roles we as public health do is notify the residents in those areas. We ask for volunteers to allow us to come in and test their water. We only, at this time, concentrate on those residents that have wells for drinking water because right now our municipal systems are fine. So if you have municipal water supply, that is not an issue unless, you know, there is some research that talks about agriculture related to using well water to water plants and things like that. But at this time, there are some concentrations of what they've identified as high levels of PFAS, and we are working with those residents to try to resolve that. Right now, we are bringing in filters, so we're paying plumbers to install filters in the homes, but we do know we have single source filters, and so there has been some complaints and requests that, you know, they would like a filter at every faucet in the home, so improvements there. And then working with the municipalities to try to extend the water, the municipal water system, but that's also a costly issue.
Thanks, Kathy. I'd like to give the last word to Dave, our filmmaker, for closing remarks.
I want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you, panelists. It's been really great having you here. Thank you, Al. There's one thing you can all do for me. This would be like really cool if you would do this for me. Dad, can you stand up? That's my dad right there. John Ruck is 80 today. Happy birthday. And I'm wondering if we could all sing happy birthday to my dad. Happy birthday, John. Are we ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dad. Happy birthday to you.
And
80.
more.
End on a happy note. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it.